So thank you for joining us this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, as we hear Dr. Ann McCarty Perez talk about how we can make the most of our master schedule. If you're not familiar with Ann, she's a passionate educator with over 20 years of experience working in schools to improve processes and outcomes. She's been a middle school teacher, principal, central office administrator for curriculum instruction and assessment. She knows state and federal programming and the use of data to make informed decisions. In fact, I picked her brain about that all the time. In her various roles, she's implemented everything from curriculum reviews and writing activities to program and process reviews, as well as MTSS and responsive instruction programs. Worked on student behavior modification plans, PBIS, coordinated projects to reduce truancy, increase student achievement, and close achievement gaps. And she's provided services for at-risk students and collaborated with parents to create school community. And her experience includes a variety of settings from urban, suburban to rural schools. And in all of that, she's found that the master schedule is really conducive to setting up the kind of conditions and environments that we need for success for our students. So with that in mind, I'm going to linger here to respond to any questions in the chat box to make sure that Ann sees those as you ask. Please don't hesitate to raise your hand or to send a question in using that chat feature throughout our session. And again, this is being recorded, and this recording will be made available to you usually within 24 hours of conclusion. So with that, Ann.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. I don't see any cameras or faces, so I feel like I'm a middle school teacher during the pandemic. Oh, thank you. Hello there, Erin. Hello, everyone. And you can just, Tony said a lot of things about me. I'm Ann. I think it's important for you to know that I'm a super nerd scheduling person. I get really excited about the spreadsheets and figuring out the puzzles that we encounter with scheduling. So let's just go ahead and get after this today. An agenda for today is that we talk about with the culture side of scheduling, starting with why, vision and mission, and collective responsibility, and then moving to the other side of scheduling, talking about data dive, and want to show you a variety of schedule options. Now, I will say this is one of the hardest topics to present in an hour, so this really is just kind of a teaser. And if you're thinking about making a schedule change, this would help you get your head around the thinking that would go with that. I would invite you to, if you want to dive deeper into any type of master scheduling, I am holding master classes, and those are sessions that are on the Creative Leadership website, and they are September, October, November, and it's going a lot deeper on setting the priorities, looking at equity in scheduling, and creating responsive schedules. And that last one is a lot of work time for schools to really dive into what is it that you want to create, and then some consultation built into it. One thing that I always like to remind people is that the master schedule is the one thing that affects everyone in your school. Teachers, students, lunch ladies, bus drivers, parents. The master schedule is the one that affects everyone. And so I always recommend for administrators or those who create the schedule to absolutely use it wisely. And the other thing I like to talk about is it is not just spreadsheets and bell times. There's a lot of work that goes to creating a master schedule that should be done before you ever change a spreadsheet or a bell time. And I like to consider scheduling an art. And I see it on two sides. I see that there's a cultural side to it, where we really talk about the shared beliefs for learning, how we prioritize the time, and it has to be built on honesty and trust. And then the technical side, and that's really where we're looking at the allocations of time, putting the puzzle together, and seeing possible hiccups that come, because anybody that's ever done a master schedule, you think you have it done, and then you realize some class is in the wrong spot, and then it throws off 15 other different things. So really trying to see those ahead of time. When we think about the schedule, the first thing we want to do is think about our why. And that is clearly define your why first. And the reason is if you know that you have naysayers, if you have people that might fight you on a schedule change, when you clearly define a why, that makes it a lot more difficult because you build that around the needs of your students. So when you have a compelling why and you're meeting the needs of your students, that's hard to argue with. Through that process, creating a set of collective beliefs. So if one of our collective beliefs is that we collaborate because all students can learn, that's going to make the case that we're going to embed PLCs or teacher-based teams or whatever the word is that you call them into your schedule. We prioritize what's going to be important. We choose what the schedule will facilitate, and we articulate and execute with transparency. And that one I can't say enough about because oftentimes teachers will think that the schedule just gets done behind the door and they made all the changes to the schedule and no one ever talked to me about it. And so when you're looking at a schedule change, that you're really transparent about it, that you're getting feedback, you're getting input, and that you, again, are using all of these things to create that schedule. And the reason is for us to make effective change, we have to establish our culture first. The strategies of scheduling are only going to be as effective as those who understand why we're doing them. And I always like to use the quote that culture trumps strategy every time. So I can build the most beautiful intervention period into a schedule or time for SEL. But if we haven't built the capacity and the desire for people to address those needs, then that's going to be wasted time in your schedule that just fails. When I look at those two sides, I consider them as the driving path and the guiding path. It's all driven by our vision, mission, and values, but that cultural side is what I call the driving path, because when we develop belief statements and we look at practices, that's going to be part of the behaviors of the adults in the building. And behaviors and beliefs drive behavior. And so it's important. That's where that why end of thing comes, and really developing that. Then we can move to the technical side of it, or the strategy side of it. And I call that the guiding path. And that's where we're looking at the data review. We're setting our priorities, and we consider the equity end of scheduling. So we look at both sides of that to create action, which is where we want to make the positive change in our school with the schedule. Want to look at it a different way? Think of it as a Venn diagram. On one side is your culture, vision, mission, core beliefs, values, behaviors. On the other side is that very, brass tacks kind of minutes, allocations. What are the structures that we're going to use? Is it 7-period day, a 6-period day? What are the courses? What are the practices and policies? Because practices and policies are directly tied to equity in the schedule. And then at the center of it, that's where we're developing our learning community, considering student needs and student voice. And I always call it a learning community because that's for the adults and for the students. And so we want that to be at the heart of our schedules. So the first thing I want to do is I want you to go into breakout rooms, which we don't have a lot of cameras, so I'm hoping that people are ready to participate. And I want you to just have a discussion of what's the current culture of your learning organization, and is your school culture ready to support a responsive schedule? And the reason I ask this question is because when we have responsive schedules, that means student needs drive our schedules and not teacher needs. So I'm going to open up breakout rooms, and I've got 2 for elementary, 2 for middle school, and 2 for high school. Join whichever is the one that best suits you, because I find that these conversations go better when we're divided by elementary, middle, and high school, especially when it's something like this, because you're going to be dealing with same issues in the schedule. So I'm going to open those up, hopefully. Tony, how come I can't see the breakout rooms? Do I have to stop the share?
They're usually in the control.
No, not there. Oh, they're there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms. Just join the one that applies to you. And we'll give you about 5 minutes to have this discussion, maybe a little bit longer.
I'm not able to see the breakout rooms. I don't know where they are. They're not across the bottom of the screen like they normally would be. And I don't have a panel that says that they're there.
And or Beverly, if you'll tell me if you'd like elementary, middle, or high, I can assign you.
I would like to be in elementary, please.
All right.
I'm sorry, I also don't have access. My apologies.
Joseph, elementary, middle, or high?
High school, please.
Guarantee you I will not remember that next time.
Thank you very
Rob
much.
here also. If I could get middle school, that would be great.
Middle school, sitting you there now, sir.
Thank you.
I don't think any of us have them. If you want us to rename ourselves with our preferred choice.
Close the door, but go through.
Technical difficulties.
All right, Aaron, where do you go?
Elementary.
All right,
And folks, if you'll just send into the chat, I'll monitor that and I'll send you off. Ann and I will send you off to the appropriate room as fast as we can.
what about Walter?
High school, please.
So weird. Natalie, Mike, what about you? I can see you.
Middle school, please.
Keeps jumping on me. Christy?
Robin Ford from Williamsburg, James City.
Elementary. Hi, Atrella Gillis. Can I have elementary?
Middle school. Got him. All right. And Barbara Smith, elementary.
Barbara, what about you?
I'm getting her right now.
Okay.
Perfect.
Tommy is middle school. All right, we'll send you to the middle school.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
How
Thanks
about
for
that one? Okay. I think we
All
got her.
right.
We need to move Kevin.
Do you want to make a random assignment on the others or leave them be?
We'll just leave them be. Why did it do that? Sure is ready. No brave souls.
I can offer my
Thanks, Mike.
my reasoning or thought by being here. We went through this process about 10 years ago, going from a 9-period kind of traditional schedule to a block schedule at the middle school. We had a scheduling expert, Elliot Marenblum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that name. He came and worked with our school over the course of a year, working with a committee of about 20 people. Ironically, none of those stakeholders were parents or students, though. It was just all teachers and representatives from different content areas, but no student or parents. So we landed on the block schedule, 57-minute blocks. We've been doing that for 10 years. And now we want to assess the effectiveness of that, and because it has been 10 years now, and has it kind of run its course, and do we need to look differently? But also we're facing some significant enrollment challenges, drops in enrollment, and where we might have to look at potentially some shared staff with other buildings. So looking at comparing and kind of getting on similar schedules as maybe even our high school to share staff. So maybe not necessarily the most ideal of circumstances, but nonetheless an ability for us to look at our master schedule again.
Good. And I'm so glad that Mike brought that up, because whenever I work with groups, this is like if you're going to make a big change, it is about a year-long process. And it's more, let's be honest, it's more a half a year, because most of you probably start on your schedule in January. So you're looking at building the culture and the climate and looking at different options up to that point. So I'm really glad that you shared that. So thank you, Mike, for that. All right. first thing that I recommend for groups to do, especially in the process that Mike is talking about, is to really take a good look at your vision and mission. And the one thing I have with vision and missions is it can sometimes or oftentimes is this kind of extraneous meeting that people sat through, and they come up with all these educator words that are multisyllabic and nobody knows what it means, but they sound awesome together. I like vision and mission to read like, our goal is to educate everyone, and how we're going to do it. Here's the 3 concrete steps, because we want to make sure that everyone can read it and understand it, because that's a public commitment. So can your parents read it and know what it means? Can your students read it and know what it means? And I'd like to take groups back to that very, like, make this something workable for you and your staff, because what you build into that mission, that's your how. How are you going to do things? And I want to see words in there that are relative to the schedule. So if we talk about an inclusive school environment, then I understand that there's going to be co-teaching and students are going to be in the general education population. If we talk about a high need for collaboration, that makes the case for PLCs. If we're addressing mental health needs or SEL, that now we're making time for advisory or homeroom or home base or whatever it might look like at each different level. So really take the time to think through your vision and mission. And then the other thing that I'm going to keep us moving because the breaks kind of, or the rooms kind of shut us down, is to look through, once you get that vision and mission, be starting to build your why, look at these 3 questions at the bottom of this slide. Are student needs the highest priority or consideration in your schedule? Because that's where we want to build a responsive schedule. Is the learning of students and adults a high priority? That makes the case for professional learning communities, because that's the number one source cited by teachers. Their favorite source of professional development is professional learning communities. And then what do priorities say about your learning culture? So think through, what are your student needs? What are your adult needs? And then what are initiatives and mandates? Because those are sometimes, you get some from the district, you have some at your school. And then what are the state and federal mandates? And this is the one that affects more secondary schools than it does elementary schools, because high schools, and you've been given you have to give a financial literacy course, you have to give there's a whole bunch of them. Each state's coming up with something, a career type of course. Middle schools usually have to have some type of career exploration course. So think through, what are those pieces that you're being given or that you're doing at your school, and how are we going to build that into the schedule? Because those are the things that we forget to think about, but those can be what overload people. Think of schedule as collective responsibility. And this is, I talked about transparency, but what is collective responsibility? That's the enhanced confidence to overcome barriers and limitations. So my short version of that is, we believe we can do hard things. And then we also need to believe that all students in the school can learn. As a principal and a central office administrator, nothing infuriated me more than the teachers would say, well, that kid's not going to pass. And I'm like, well, then that kid doesn't need you as a teacher. Because we have to go in with these beliefs, and we have to set up the schedule so that these beliefs become a reality. In leadership, you have to nurture that climate. You have to nurture the collaboration. You have to create time and direction to enable the teachers to do that, so that they share in the confidence and have high expectations to make a difference. So that the principal has to lead in that way, that you believe in collaboration. You model that because you create a scheduling team. You believe that your teachers can do it. You constantly nurture that. And I think that this year, that teachers are a little bit beat up from the last year or two. I think administrators are too. I remember my COVID principaling. And when you think you can't do anything else, you're going to be asked to do something additional. And so it's really important that we nurture that climate. And think of it this way, that collective responsibility is the why to the school success, and the well-developed schedule gives you the how and the what. So build from that why. What's your why for your school? And then the how and the what is, what does that schedule look like? What are the courses offering? What are the minutes? All the other fun stuff that comes with scheduling. Always remember this too, that targeted instruction plus time equals learning. And this comes from the work of Solution Tree and Mike Matos, but he's a really big one on this. If a student needs more time in the content area, then create the schedule so that they can have more time in the content area. Because that's going to be what's going to equal learning for that student. One thing I recommend for anybody that's looking at doing anything with their schedule is to do what I call a data dive. And this is probably about 1/3 of what I take groups through in a data dive. And always look at as many types of data as you have. If you have, some schools have Panorama, which is the SEL data. Some have your state test data. Now, always look at state test data with caution, especially right now, because everything's been a little bit wonky with data, but you might have progress monitoring tools. You might have district assessments. You could have common formative assessments. And just look at creating a whole picture of what your school has in terms of data, and create data if you need to. Do student surveys, get their voice in it, focus groups. And then I bucket them into academic data, intervention and enrichment, course pathways and the graduation rate for high schools, discipline and SEL, and then advanced courses. And I loop equity into advanced courses. And so I like to take groups through answering these questions because this starts to help prioritize the schedule. So first question always is, does your core instruction meet the needs of at least 80% of your students? That's what MTSS and RTI tells us. If your tier 1 instruction is not meeting the needs of 80% of your students, you have to look at tier 1 instruction. What I see schools do is build in a 30-minute intervention period, but they've never addressed tier 1 instruction. So for the 45, 50, 90-minute or 100 minutes that a student is with a teacher, that 30-minute intervention period is not going to do you any good if the tier 1 instruction isn't where it needs to be. And so teams have to start there, because if you're trying to just band-aid it with intervention, you're not really addressing the root cause, and you're really kind of wasting 30 minutes of your day in your schedule. So I'm going to hopefully open those breakout rooms and send you back in by level. And I want you to just like look at one of these and kind of talk about it in your group. And what would this look like for you if you started doing this type of really looking at the data and answering these questions? What would it inform of your schedule? All right, so let's try this, Tony.
It looks like it saved them. And I'm gonna assign David to high school. I think he said was his preference. Yes.
And for those of you that just joined us, if you will tell us your level or put it in the chat box, we'll send you to elementary, middle, or high school.
I've got Kendra.
Cindy?
Nadia. It's in the middle.
Oh, stop recording, Tony.
Oh, thank you for that. There we go. Yes, nice to see some familiar faces.
It is. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. You had approximately 8 minutes to do a data dive that could take all day. But anybody want to unmic and capture the spirit of the conversation you had? Maybe you tackled one of these questions, or you lamented together in those rooms.
I can share for elementary.
Thank you, Lisa.
We just spent a lot of time because we were talking previously about interventions and the block of time, because we do have that 30 minutes. And we just kind of talked a lot about tier 1 and what makes effective tier 1 instruction. I think you really can get lost in that conversation. So we spent a lot of time talking about that, and just, I think, being clear with what makes up effective tier 1 instruction, because sometimes I think teachers feel like if we say it's not effective instruction, that's personal, or it's a lack of instruction on their end, but it might be lack of instructional materials. So getting to and being very clear about what it means to have effective tier 1 instruction. So we spent a lot of time talking about that.
That's good. And for all of my elementary friends on this call, I want to say one of the things that I have noticed in elementary schools is, and it's unique to elementary, is I've often seen that the students who have the highest needs or the most services are the ones that have the most transitions in their day. Because they've got to go here, or they go see the title teacher, or they go see they have a pullout, and then they go to OT or PT or speech, or all of those services that we give to elementary students. And what I have noticed is that the students who need the most in elementary have a day that just is so disjointed. And so especially for and I would encourage this for everyone, is bring as many services as you can to the general education environment, and really consider those transitions, because minutes just get lost in the day for elementary students. And again, like I said, my observation in working through schedules with elementaries, it tends to be the students who have the highest needs. And of course, just going down the hallway to see whatever teacher takes longer than it should have anyway. So that's just something that I've noticed in elementary to kind of be aware of, since we brought that up. Anybody else want to share? Maybe someone from our secondary groups? Oh, my camera's in.
I can share for middle school.
Yeah.
We kind of compared different schedules for middle schools and how many periods it was, and then within the periods, which ones may have met more often, less often, and kind of some of those nuances and how to set that up, and then how to fit in MTSS. So
Okay.
I don't know if we came into any conclusions, but that's what we talked about. It was helpful.
And you know what, when I do these scheduling workshops, I know that I ask people to talk about things, but the truth is people really want to know what other people are doing. And sometimes someone on this call might have your answer, and it might not be in my slides, and I'm totally fine with that. And that's why I like you to be talking with each other. I mean, my ultimate goal, if you talk about my vision and my mission, is to create a cadre of responsive schedulers across the United States. And how am I going to do it? I'm just going to keep talking about the same stuff and getting people to share with it. All right. Let's talk about a needs assessment. And this is one that I recommend that you do, is through that data dive, you're kind of doing a needs assessment, but really sit back and think about, what does your school need? And take time to do that. And when you establish a need, whether through a theme that you saw in your data or just something that you're noticing in general, because as school people, you're collecting data all day long. Sometimes it's quantitative, sometimes it's qualitative. When you see that, always complete a root cause analysis on it. And if you're not familiar with root cause analysis, you really identify a problem and you keep asking why. They recommend at least 5 times until you find what is the root cause. And the root cause is something that you can control, because we don't want to spend time trying to control things that we can't control. We can't control home life, and we can't control what happens outside of the school, but we can control what happens inside of the school. And so really try to figure out, why are we having the issue that we have, or why is this presenting, and see if that's something that you can address through the schedule. And then establish what should be driving your schedule. And, within the student needs, establish that. And sometimes I see it's a who that drives the schedule. Or sometimes for my elementary friends, it's the music department that comes from the high school that might drive your schedule. People always laugh when I say that. It's the orchestra teacher that drives that elementary schedule. And so really think of what is driving your schedule. And sometimes in high school, it's marching band. Like, let's just be honest, marching band drives high school schedule sometimes. Crosswalk whatever you find in that needs assessment with what your data is doing, and then really come up with solid needs that you want to address through your schedule. All right, so now the part that everybody's waiting for is, what are some options? Since the middle school group already kind of started talking about that. Now, the one thing I want to say is I'm just going to show you structures. And remember that within any of these structures, there's 8,000 different options that you can do with schedules. That's the thing that I really get kind of nerded out about, is that I'm like, what do I need to take from that to do that, to do that, to do that? First thing you have to do though, is I do what's called the reality check. And you really have to know what are your time, how many minutes are in your day, and what's your staffing. Because I can show you the most beautiful schedules in the world, and you might not be able to make it go because your staffing doesn't let you, and maybe your district's not going to add any minutes to your day. So you have to be realistic about that when you are building your schedule. What are the teacher assignments? And sometimes in a negotiated agreement, teachers can only have 2 preps, or they have to have a certain amount of planning time, or whatever that may be. How many course offerings are you going to have? And the middle school groups start talking about that, like how many periods are in the day? And of those 8 or 7 periods, how many of them are going to be an elective? How many are going to be core? What are the initiatives and mandates? Lunch and pastimes. Lunch and pastimes can eat up a lot of the day that you don't think about. If you have a union negotiated agreement, you more than likely have a 30-minute uninterrupted lunch. If you have pastimes, and depending on how many periods you have, that can be anywhere from 20 to 40 some odd minutes lost in your day. So minutes that you can't even count on are anywhere from 50 to 70 some odd minutes, just because through lunch and pastimes. If you have singletons, and this is more than likely at the middle school and the high school, know where those are and know what they are, because you don't want to you're going to have to work around those. And then also know what's happening with your special populations, because services will also drive how and what you create. There are block schedules, and there are traditional schedules, and there's just some other kinds of schedules. And so I'm just going to kind of run through these. I've got some pluses and minuses of them that I've seen with groups, and or having done them in my schools myself. So let's look at block schedules first. Oh, we're not going to do that. And then there's the typical 8-period block, which some groups elect to do this as a semester, and they do 4 blocks. And then in the second semester, they do the next 4 blocks. That's why it's called an 8 block. But essentially it's 90 to 100 minutes every other day, or 90 to 100 minutes for a day. And the class meets for the semester. For the block periods, and you're going to see this across all of them, your benefits are the increased instructional time that you get. You definitely cut down on transitions, because you go from 40 some odd minutes to potentially 15 minutes. So you save time on the blocks, and you have more options for credit. For the high schools, if you're trying to get students to a certain number of credits, the 8 period and the 7 period is just going to have more options for you. Challenges of the block are that the pedagogy can be challenging. And sometimes what I see schools do is they adopt a block and they never did professional development for their teachers. And so the teachers struggle in the block, because 90 to 100 minutes can be a really long time. Now, my elementary friends right now are saying, well, we do that all the time. Yes, elementary operates on block, but for the secondary people, that one becomes a little bit different. And sometimes it can be challenging for special populations. Then we go to a 7-period block, and that is where you really have 6 blocks, and then you have what's called the singleton. So 3 of the blocks meet every other day, and that singleton meets every day. So in the option that I have here, it's that block 2 that would meet every day for half the amount of time. I had this in my middle school. We absolutely loved it. The hard part about this is sometimes teachers, the pacing of the courses get off because they're used to that block, and then there's this 45-minute class that meets every day. So teachers have to be careful with the pacing. And again, same benefits as the other blocks. And then the 6-period block. And this one, this really increases the instructional time, 110 to almost 120 minutes. And the students would have 3 classes, and they meet every other day. One thing that I would say about any of these block classes, if you're looking for creative ideas, is if you get into one of these structures, it is really easy to split these classes and create additional classes. So if I look at this 6 period, and I take block 1 and I divide that into 2 classes that meet every other day, it's still a 50 or 60-minute class, and I've created another opportunity for students to have another class. And depending on what those courses look like, you could almost divide it 3 ways, and they're 40-minute classes. So if you're looking to increase elective options or something like that for students, this is actually a really easy way to do that. Because if we look at a 40-minute class every other day or a 50-minute class every other day, that's better than not getting the class at all. Your traditional day, that's where you take your minutes and you divide them evenly between 6, 7, or 8. And they're the same classes, they meet every day for the same amount of time. These are what I call the comfortable schedules. This is what most people had when they were going through school, depending on how old you are. And, you know, teachers like it because they see students every day. It is great for skills classes that need daily reinforcement because they are seeing the students every day. The challenges of these is that they don't allow for extended periods, so that beautiful pedagogy that you can get, or project-based or problem-based learning, is limited because it's hard to do that in a 42 to 45-minute period. There's a lot of time lost in transitions. 3 to 5 minutes transitioning, you know, 7 times a day, you're looking at 35 to 45 minutes. You've lost a period alone just in transitions on a traditional schedule. And it does create what's called, you know, or what I would consider a very fragmented day for students. You know, I remember watching middle school students come in and just try to do 8 classes in a day. It's a sprint for them because they do come from these long blocks of ELA and math in elementary to boom, now you have eight or so teachers in a day. And then there are what I call them alternative schedules now, because the word hybrid, I think, makes everybody's neck hair stand up. But these are what I call the compromise schedules. And this is where we take a traditional schedule, whether it's 8 or 7 or 6 periods, and we add a couple of block days in. So you could do 2 a week. I have a school that's doing 3. I'm not sure how that's going to work out mathematically for me. 2 days seems to work better because of A and a B day. This is nice because it does allow for that traditional that people like, but you also have a day or 2 where you can have those really cool extended block periods for students. Sometimes people say this is confusing. I don't know that that's a thing anymore, but I put it on there because some people say it's confusing. One way that I've seen this done is to do a block day on Monday, a traditional day on Monday, and then block Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I like that because on Monday, teachers would see every kid, and then they'd have block every day thereafter. Also, in a school calendar, we miss a lot of Mondays. So if we're going to miss a day because of the calendar, we wouldn't want it to be a block day. We want it to have a traditional. It's also nice for those weird weeks where we have like 1 day or 2 day or sometimes 3 days. You can just run your traditional schedule, and then the teachers see every kid. So it's a little bit more flexible. Then there's this thing that's called the drop or rotating schedule. Anyone familiar with this one? This is a fun one. In elementary schools, you could do something like this if you didn't have shared staff. And really what you do is you drop a period and add it to the end of the day. So if this is an option of a 7-period day, you can see on day 1, we go through periods 1 through 7, and then we drop period 1 and we start with period 2, ending with period 1. This allows teachers to see kids at different times of the day. And that's really, if you can do it, it's really cool because that infamous like second period isn't always the infamous second period at the end of the day because it rotates. This is confusing sometimes, mostly for adults, usually not for students. They're a lot more resilient with it, but you do have to coordinate your resources. Something also cool that I've seen with this is some schools will take and make that first time slot longer so that they're adding time to that period over the course of 5 days. So if you wanted to do like an intervention or enrichment, you would tack it onto that. So then really the kids would be in period 1 plus 30, and then 2 plus 30, and 3 plus 30, or whatever the minutes are. So you can, it's kind of cool because then you go through your whole schedule and kids have been given extra time in every class. And then there's mixed time schedules, which for my elementary friends, you do this all the time. But for secondary schools, this is not very common. And this is where we might decide that some content areas have a longer period of time. Schools that are in school improvement or that are, kind of working through the math and the ELA may elect to do this. And this is where math and ELA, that class 1 and class 4 would meet every day. And it's for the 90-minute block and everything else is 45 minutes. This is nice because this allows us to really meet the needs of students. I put a caution on it, especially for secondary schools, because when we start allocating more minutes to different subject areas, that becomes kind of a sticky wicket at the elementary or at the secondary, because it makes more classes look more important than others. Now, that's just an appearance. This is why I lead school groups through that data dive, because if my data tells me that my reading needs more time, then it makes sense to give it 90 minutes. Again, we build that compelling why for why we're building what we're doing. And so it's important that you do that so that you have it, because the double block of ELA at middle school became like a thing. In my particular middle school, I had a 98% pass rate in ELA. I know that's unheard of. And I had a double block of ELA, but I didn't necessarily need that. I was trying to continue the FLES program into middle school and allocate those minutes to students exploring world language. I didn't have a compelling why other than the district told me that I had to have an extra reading class for every kid. I could build a lot more compelling why for why they needed to continue the world language. So this is just one that it works beautifully for really meeting those needs, but I do caution groups to really build the why of why in doing this. Okay, so I've hit the end. I always use the iceberg for schedules because there's so much about a schedule that's below the ice. And we've hit the end, but I do want to what ahas or what ideas did you see? Anybody want to share? And I'll stay on to answer questions as well.
Well, and we did have a question from Barbara in reference to the needs assessment. She wonders if the needs assessment may be completed in concert with piloting innovative programming. She says need assessments might not be influenced by new ideas, but they can be very effective after piloting of informed practices.
I would agree. If you're piloting anything, keep your data from that. And if that's working, that's something that you continue to build on. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
And we've had a couple of requests for copies of the slides or the information. So ladies and gentlemen, that will be available in a follow-up email, usually in 24 hours to allow the recording time to process. And of course, you see Ann's contact information here on the screen. So be looking for an email from us within about 24 hours that will contain a recording to this session.
And thank you everyone for joining us today. And again, I'll hang out for a few minutes to answer questions if anybody has them.